Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 205 based on novel. So let's start. Hikaitu controlled his machine and charged directly into the city through the enormous hole that he had blown open. Countless cannon barrels snapped open on the metal sphere, and more than 20 barrels that looked like spikes concentrated penetrating white light. More than 20 overbeams of white light surged into the air in the next moment and pierced through the heavens. These soul tools were called long-range piercing cannons and were Class 8 soul tools. This soul tool had the second longest range. Stationary soul cannon shells could go farther. Booming sounds resonated in waves through the sky as flashes of fire and light flickered again and again. This was the result of the Eye of the Azura working together with the Origin of Destruction, and piercing cannons that could lock onto its target swept over all the surveillance soul tools in the sky above Oak City. Oak City immediately became blind, so that they were temporarily unable to seek reinforcements from cities a little further away. Long-range transmission soul tools were starting to appear within the Sun-Moon Empire as technology continued to advance. However, these transmission soul tools required satellites in the sky for transmission. Otherwise, they couldn't reach their extremely long ranges. The first things that Huiyuhao and Hikaitu locked onto were these satellites, as doing so meant Oak City was temporarily unable to send any information or messages out. Furthermore, their Fort Soul Engineer Legion wouldn't leave any traces behind. Hikaitu stopped attacking once he completed this attack. Instead, he stood fast and proudly in an empty space within the city's gates. Oak City didn't have any strength to resist at all, and Hikaitu could trample through this city with his all-terrain self-driving fort even if he was all by himself. The Fort Soul Engineer Legion had entered the city by now, but the other members didn't charge in through the city gate. They instead scaled the city's walls. That was the reason why all-terrain self-driving forts were called that. Walls couldn't stop them. Every self-driving fort's 8 limbs were extremely sharp, just like 8 long spears. Each limb had 3 different joints, and its toughest component was at the bottom. It was crafted using a special kind of metal that was very hard and tough. These limbs could casually pierce into the city's walls through mechanical power, and could carry their heavy and bulky bodies as they climbed swiftly. The self-driving forts could scale the city's walls with a few motions, and could even attack with soul rays and soul cannons as they climbed. Somebody watching from the sky would be able to see a very spectacular scene. 300 all-terrain self-driving forts appeared on Oak City's walls at almost the same time before they quickly scaled it. Some remained to keep their vantage point, while others entered the city. From this moment onwards, Oak City had been completely taken over. This couldn't even be considered a battle, as everything was simply too easy, to the point where it would raise people's hackles. Taking over the government building and the several warehouses that Huiyuhao had detected earlier happened 15 minutes later, as screaming and shouting could be heard everywhere in the city. Hikaitu had ordered the Fort Soul Engineer Legion not to attack civilians, but they still did everything they could to destroy and damage several taller and more conspicuous buildings. Emptying warehouses was a simple task for soul engineers. Storage soul tools had limited space, but Huiyuhao's spectral demoplane had almost unlimited space. Before Huiyuhao took off, he had ordered Bai to lead the undead creatures to create a large makeshift warehouse inside his spectral demoplane. This place was more than suitable for storing all sorts of resources and items. 1 hour later, the Fort Soul Engineer Legion disappeared just as suddenly as they had appeared, and Oak City was in ruins. But when the soldiers who had previously hidden away came back out to check the damage, they realized that there had been very few casualties in the pillaging process. There were several who had been injured from the damaged buildings, but there were very few who had died. But they really wanted to cry when they inspected their warehouses. Their granaries had been emptied, and their large warehouses which were used to store rare items for trading were also emptied, while several of their major businesses had all been cleaned out. They were in the cold north, and that meant they were extremely dependent on food. Winter was coming, and it wasn't hard to imagine the burden that empty granaries would have on Oak City. The citizens were already fearful and beginning to panic because of this sudden ambush, and their panic would be amplified when they saw that they no longer had any food. A long time ago, pillaging an entire city with an army which consisted of soul masters was impossible. But now, Hui Yuhao and the others had accomplished this feat by relying on formidable soul tools. The 4th Soul Engineer Legion Soul Masters were resting inside the spectral demoplane, but nobody could hide the excitement on their faces. Their excitement didn't come from the resources and items they had pillaged. Instead, their excitement came from the feeling of battle. They were a group of amateur soul engineers who were fighting together, and that sensation of destruction when nobody could fight back against them simply felt too wonderful. The Tang sect's senior members were gathered inside the warehouse. Bei Bei stared at the mountains of food and heaved a sigh as he said, "If not for the fact that we were at war, stealing food from a city of citizens isn't anything to be proud of." Shu Sanxia laughed and said, "Why do I remember that you were the one who came up with this immoral idea? Why are you suddenly shedding crocodile tears?" Bei Bei shot a glare at him. "Food is part of a nation's core. We're here to wreak havoc and destroy things, so making our move on food is the easiest. Food isn't like soul tools. Places that are storing large amounts of soul tools and materials are definitely heavily guarded, and we can't go head-to-head with our enemies. It's different for food. Any city's citizens need to eat, and we can choose places like Oak City where they don't have sufficient strength to defend themselves. We can minimize losses and complete our mission as quickly as possible at the same time, and we can cause panic as well. My idea is excellent." Shu Sanxia nodded seriously and said, "It is excellent. Just a little immoral. So be it, for the Doluo continent's future." Bei Bei answered valiantly. Hui Yuhao said, "Oak City is an important city in the Sun Moon Empire's northern territory, except their defenses were so slack because there's almost no possibility that a battle can occur here. The granaries in Oak City are very important for the Sun Moon Empire's northern territory, as the food that is stored there covers tens of thousands of square kilometers in the north. The Sun Moon Empire's entire northern territory will be greatly alarmed after our ransacking. What's our next target?" Bei Bei asked. Hui Yuhao opened his map. He placed his finger on Oak City's position before he shifted his finger towards the east and stopped at another city. The city looked a lot larger than Oak City on the map. Eastern Sun City is the Sun Moon Empire's #1 city in their northern territories. It's the only city which can be considered a large city. Oak City was just an opportunity for us to train. Eastern Sun City is our most important objective in our northern invasion. We can retreat from the north as long as we conquer Eastern Sun City. Eastern Sun City contains the largest warehouses for storing food and all kinds of resources. There are 20,000 proper soldiers stationed within the city. Furthermore, there must be soul tools defending it, and they are likely to be equipped with linked soul tools. There will be a single Soul Engineer Legion stationed there under normal circumstances, as it is the most important stronghold in the north. But the Sun Moon Empire has mobilized their great armies for the invasion, which has resulted in an empty back rank. Eastern Sun City's Soul Engineer Legion is likely to have been deployed, and there won't be many even if there are some who remain. We have broken through Oak City so quickly, and it will need some time to report this to Eastern Sun City and request backup. We have destroyed their satellites after all, so there's no way they can make any long-range transmissions. Therefore, we have to attack Eastern Sun City, and quickly. Eastern Sun City will fall no matter what, and we will not sustain many losses." Bei Bei nodded and said, "All right, then you can go." He Kaitu rubbed his palms together. "Leave this to me and the 4th Soul Engineer Legion. What's 20,000 soldiers? My enormous fort will sweep them clean." Hui Yuhao shook his head and laughed as he said, "We cannot be complacent, second senior brother. Attacking Eastern Sun City is very important, and we can't be sure how formidable its defenses are. Therefore, we have to change our tactics." "How?" Hikaitu asked. Hui Yuhao chuckled and whispered something into his ear. Eastern Sun City was the Sun Moon Empire's most important stronghold in the north. The city was positioned toward the eastern side of the Sun Moon Empire's northern territory, and was less than 1,000 kilometers from the Heavenly Soul Empire's original borders. Of course, the Heavenly Soul Empire's territory in that direction had now been drawn into the Sun Moon Empire, while Eastern Sun City's strategic importance naturally became a lot smaller than before. But Eastern Sun City was still the Sun Moon Empire's most important stronghold in the north. The city was very close to the ice sea, and the soldiers and soul engineers stationed there were responsible for defending against any aquatic soul beasts that could come out from the ice sea. Aquatic soul beasts that could live in the ice sea almost all possessed both ice-type and water-type abilities, and were very powerful. They would occasionally attack as they attempted to hunt for food along the shore, and to kill humans. Therefore, Eastern Sun City had the responsibility of fighting them, and to prevent aquatic soul beasts from wreaking havoc along the shores. Aquatic soul beasts and soul beasts on land were a little different, as most aquatic soul beasts lived in groups. Therefore, they would become very difficult to deal with once they started causing trouble. This was also the reason why Eastern Sun City was so heavily guarded. Eastern Sun City's walls were 300 feet tall, and it could be considered a standard large city. The city's walls were thick, and there were all sorts of offensive and defensive soul tools along the top of the city wall. There were more than 70 aerial surveillance soul tools in the skies above the city, and they were responsible for watching several thousand square kilometers in Eastern Sun City's proximity. Even though Eastern Sun City was in the north, it was the largest city in that region, and thus was a busy and bustling city. Many northerners were proud of being able to live in Eastern Sun City, and this also meant land within the city had exorbitant prices. It was evening, and there were fewer and fewer people near the city gates. They had to be prepared against aquatic soul beasts which could appear at any moment, so Eastern Sun City's gates would close every day after sundown. A man and a woman carrying simple luggage was walking towards the gates. They seemed very tall, but had normal appearances, and they looked like husband and wife. The soldiers responsible for standing guard were hiding from the cold in their bunks inside the city gates. Eastern Sun City was a large city, but they weren't strict with inspecting individuals who were coming into and out of the city. This wasn't very necessary, as nothing remotely related to war had happened at Eastern Sun City for a long time besides fighting aquatic soul beasts, just like Oak City. This was especially so after much of the Heavenly Soul Empire's territory had been conquered, and Eastern Sun City became a city towards the back of the Sun Moon Empire's territory. There were all kinds of surveillance soul tools in the sky, while their enemies wouldn't choose to attack this place. The man and woman strode into the city easily. They were in the north, so the sky darkened relatively early. The sky had turned completely dark just as they entered the city. The girl glanced at the youth next to her with a look of admiration in her eyes. "You were right. Eastern Sun City's defenses are slack, like they aren't defending it at all." There was no doubt that this man and woman were Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong, who had used imitation to change their appearances. Hui Yuhao laughed and said, "Don't worship me. I'm just a legend." Tang Wutong giggled and said, "I'm hungry, legend. Are we going to find a place to eat? It's still early." "All right." Hui Yuhao wasn't worried at all. There were more than 250 kilometers between Oak City and Eastern Sun City, and Oak City would need at least a day to report any information to Eastern Sun City, even if they did so as soon as possible. Oak City's satellites and transmission soul tools had been destroyed after all, and their resources had been cleaned out. The first thing the local officials had to do was stabilize everything inside the city while sending out information at the same time. Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong needed but 2 hours to fly to Eastern Sun City. They had more than enough time to execute their plan. They found a barbecue shop and walked in. The weather in the north was extremely cold, and people who lived here needed to replenish a lot of heat to sustain their daily work and activities. That was the reason why meat and wine were very welcome inside the city. Roast meat and ale were considered the greatest luxuries for typical citizens. It was dinner time, so the barbecue shop had quite a few customers. They were about 80% full. "What do you guys want to eat?" The waiter trotted over and asked hastily. "What do you guys have?" Hui Yuhao replied. The waiter answered, "You must be from elsewhere. Eastern Sun City is famous for its roasted snow pork." "Snow pork? What's that?" Tang Wutong asked curiously. The waiter continued, "We rear a species of small pigs, and they have a lot of fat, and taste very rich. Roasting them to about 70% is best. They can be marinated with all kinds of sauces, and our best combined with a cup of our local specialty ale. Even gods will salivate with that combination. Hui Yuhao laughed when he heard the waiter talk about salivating gods. The image of the god of emotions cooking surfaced in his mind. No matter how delicious the roast pork here was, it probably couldn't compare to his culinary skills. All right. Get us some roasted snow pork, and give us some of your signature dishes as well, along with 2 cups of ale. All right. Please wait for a few moments, the food is coming right up. The waiter was like a gust of wind as he swiftly turned and left. Tang Wutong heaved a faint sigh and said, if only there weren't any war going on. Why does the Sun Moon Empire have to invade us? Hui Yuhao answered, the thirst for power. A ruler will start an invasion at all costs in order to satisfy his desire for even more power, and the citizens are the ones who suffer in the end. Even though we are reacting passively and at a disadvantage, we are still the ones starting a war. The citizens are still the ones suffering. Even though we have a different starting point, the end result will not be that much different. The only thing we can do is try our best not to hurt those innocent citizens. Tang Wutong could feel that Hui Yuhao was a little dispirited. She held his hand that was on the table and said, don't think so much. We're doing this so that fewer people will suffer the fires of battle. Hui Yuhao said, the main reason why a large city like Eastern Sun City has such lax defenses is because of its geographical location. Golden light swirled beneath his eyes as he spoke, and he activated spiritual detection. Hui Yuhao didn't choose this eatery for nothing. This barbecue shop was located in Eastern Sun City's central region, and the government office wasn't far from here. Hui Yuhao's spiritual detection activated at maximum range around him from this location could reach everything within Eastern Sun City. Conducting surveillance before executing their mission was Hui Yuhao's standard fighting strategy. Eastern Sun City was a large city after all, and it was different from Oak City. Hui Yuhao still had to be careful. His spiritual undulations actually became weaker rather than stronger when he was using spiritual detection as his spiritual power improved. But this weakness wasn't in terms of his detection capabilities. Instead, it was the spiritual undulations produced during the detection process that became weaker. It would be harder to discover his spiritual detection this way. Even spiritual detectors had to lock onto their targets' locations by sensing spiritual undulations. When spiritual undulations were weak to a certain extent, not even spiritual detectors could lock onto their targets. Furthermore, Hui Yuhao's control over his spiritual detection was improving even as the spiritual detectors were evolving. Back when he had first faced off against the Death God Dolor had discovered him because he had used spiritual detection, and that created a lot of trouble for him. He was almost unable to escape. But now, such circumstances wouldn't have happened. The reason for that was because Hui Yuhao could release a concrete material spiritual avatar when he was sensing danger, and he would use this spiritual avatar to activate spiritual detection. That way, even if his enemy's spiritual detectors discovered him during the detection process, they would only be locking onto his spiritual avatar. Hui Yuhao could control his spiritual avatar to run in a different direction from his body. He didn't have to worry about anything as long as he kept a single thread of his spiritual power from that spiritual avatar. Therefore, Hui Yuhao's strongest characteristic wasn't his fighting ability, but rather his ability to survive. Hui Yuhao had a chance to survive even if he encountered extraordinarily powerful individuals like the Dragon Emperor Dolor, Long Xiaoyao. But he still needed some luck. In the end, Ultimate Dolor controlled the secret of space, and escaping from their hands wasn't easy at all. Hui Yuhao could still lose his life, even from a single shred of danger. Hui Yuhao's spiritual power expanded into the distance, and more than half of Eastern Sun City was quickly within his detection range. He didn't share his spiritual detection with Tang Wutong because there was too much information, and that would cause a relatively large shock to her senses. It didn't take long before their roasted meat and ale were served. The waiter looked at Hui Yuhao, who was just sitting there with his head slightly lowered like he was dozing off. But the waiter didn't pay him too much mind because business was too busy, and he hurried away after putting down the food. There was a sharp knife on the plate of roasted pork to cut those large pieces. Tang Wutong cut a piece and placed it into her mouth. Her eyes began to flow with pleasant surprise. Snow pork did taste different from normal pork. The snow pork was rich with fat, and all that lard entered the lean meat after roasting. It was fragrant but not too greasy, and thick aromatic juices filled her entire mouth once she took a bite. It was very delicious. Hui Yuhao seemed to wake up from his brief nap after a few moments. He raised his head and glanced at Tang Wutong with a faint smile on his face and said, "How does it taste?" Tang Wutong had a sip of ale. "It's very good, you should have some." "All right." Hui Yuhao had a piece of roasted meat. He was as astonished and impressed as Tang Wutong was, and it didn't take long for them to clear the food that they had ordered. The ale wasn't that good, but it was fresh, and it was very effective at washing away the pork's oiliness. "Let's find a place to stay." Hui Yuhao held Tang Wutong's hand after paying the bill and stepped out of the barbecue shop as they walked towards a street in the east. The sky had already turned dark, and the weather was very cold. There was hardly anybody on the streets. Hui Yuhao wrapped an arm around Tang Wutong's slim waist as he asked gently, "Are you cold?" Tang Wutong smiled as she shook her head. "I'm not cold. I enjoy this cool and refreshing feeling." Of course, she wouldn't ask that same question back to Hui Yuhao. He was a soul master with ultimate ice. Hui Yuhao said, "It would be more appropriate if we deployed the Tang Sect Soul Engineer Legion after this. We need to be agile, and it seems like we have to split up this time." Tang Wutong was a little surprised. "Is there a problem?" Hui Yuhao answered, "A little. This city has a stronger military force than our initial judgment. They have roughly 150 soul engineers, and there's a soul tool front inside Eastern Sun City, towards the northern side. It should be used to defend against aquatic soul beasts. It seems like aquatic soul beasts appear very often in this place. Otherwise, there should be no reason for them to deploy a soul tool front in a place like this. Furthermore, there are actually many powerful spiritual detectors around that soul tool front. I was already discovered from a slight contact before this, and might have been locked onto if I hadn't reacted quickly enough." Tang Wutong thought for a moment. "We might have some problems if we can't sneak our way inside. We will likely be exposed if we let them unleash their soul tool front's offensive and defensive capabilities. Even if we charge and force our way inside, they will have sufficient time to relay information out of the city." Hui Yuhao said, "That's why we can only barge our way in. The strategic position of Eastern Sun City is very important to the Sun Moon Empire. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stationed so many troops there. Once we complete our destruction of this place, we'll greatly affect the Sun Moon Empire's deployment in the north. In this way, we'll be closer to our goal. That's why this fight cannot be avoided." Tang Wutong's eyes brightened immediately, and she said, "Yuhao, I have an idea. Since the Sun Moon Empire has installed a lot of spiritual detection soul tools within their soul formations in Eastern Sun City, such that you can't even use your spiritual power, does it mean that they are guarding against enemies who are adept at spiritual abilities? If that's the case, is it possible that they are guarding against aquatic soul beasts?" Hui Yuhao suddenly thought of something. He had known Tang Wutong for a long time. He immediately understood what she was thinking. "Are you saying that there are spiritual-type aquatic soul beasts here which can become my spirit?" Ever since Hui Yuhao got the Ice Bear King as his spirit, the soul rings of his ultimate ice martial soul were already completely filled. The Ice Bear King gave him his 8th soul ring, and his remaining strength was sufficient to confer on him his 9th soul ring. When his 2nd soul core successfully formed, he would be a true 9-ring title Doluor. However, things were different for his other martial soul. Currently, Hui Yuhao had 5 spirits: the Snow Empress, Ice Empress, Sky Dream Ice Worm, Ice Bear King, and Star Anise Mysterious Ice Grass. 4 of his spirits affected Hui Yuhao's Ice Jade Empress Scorpion. But his spirit eyes only had 7 rings so far. Hui Yuhao once swore that he would never kill a soul beast to obtain soul rings ever again. This made it even harder for him to obtain a spiritual-type soul ring. Although his spiritual power was very great right now, soul rings were still very significant for soul masters. This was applicable even for Hui Yuhao. If he could obtain the last 2 soul rings he needed for his spirit eyes, his spiritual abilities would definitely be greatly increased. Hui Yuhao was also trying to ride his luck. It would be great if he could get a spiritual type spirit and 2 more soul rings for his spirit eyes. Otherwise, he would just forget it. Anyway, he was still a titled Dolor if he had 9 soul rings for his ultimate ice martial soul. Although it would be regretful if he had 2 fewer soul rings for his spiritual type martial soul, it wouldn't be too impactful. Right now, he immediately realized that he might stand a chance after Tang Wutong reminded him. If he could obtain a spiritual type soul ring here, his abilities could improve further. The biggest benefit to increasing his spiritual power was increasing his probability of success when he tried forming his second soul core in the future. Whichever method he used to form his second soul core, his spiritual control was very important. Even though his spiritual control was already very strong now, he was still some way off from the rank 98 Transcendent Dolor who were trying to form their second soul core. Dim lights flashed, and Hui Yuhao revealed a pensive look in his eyes. After a brief moment, he said, "If your conjecture is right, we'll need to make a trip to the Ice Sea." Tang Wutong said, "Let's go together once we're finished with things over here." Less than 15 kilometers away from the northern city gates of the eastern city was the northern side of the Ice Sea. It was very close. At this moment, Hui Yuhao suddenly felt as if there was something moving in his spiritual sea. He thought of something, and generated a connection with his spiritual sea. "You should ask me about something like this." The Snow Empress' voice sounded. As Hui Yuhao's spiritual power grew stronger, his spirits had to go through his spiritual sea to inform him that they wanted to connect to him. Hui Yuhao relaxed the control of his spiritual sea before their intentions were made known to him. He didn't do this intentionally. After his cultivation improved, his spiritual sea reached a solid state. Yes. Although the Ice Sea wasn't the ice plains of the extreme north, it was still extremely cold. The Snow Lady was once the ruler of the ice plains of the extreme north. Naturally, she knew best. Hui Yuhao smacked his own forehead. "I was really stupid. It would have been easier for me to just ask the Snow Lady whether a spiritual type soul beast can appear here." He opened his spiritual interference domain, and everything around him became slightly blurry. No matter whether it was the aerial surveillance soul tools or those who passed by, they couldn't see anything for 10 meters around him. "Snow Empress," Hui Yuhao gently called. 2 beams of light shone at the same time. One was white, and the other was green. 2 beauties appeared in front of Hui Yuhao. They were the Ice and Snow Empresses. The Snow Empress smiled and said, "You are really dumb. You don't even know how to tap into your advantages. Who else is better equipped than my sister and I when it comes to the extreme north?" Hui Yuhao laughed bitterly. "Don't mock me anymore. Are there any spiritual type soul beasts in the northern Ice Sea?" The Snow Empress answered without any hesitation, "Yes. Of course there are. Anything is possible in the sea." "What?" Hui Yuhao's eyes lit up after hearing her words. He also didn't expect the Snow Empress to be so certain. The Snow Empress said, "It seems like neither of you are very familiar with aquatic soul beasts." Hui Yuhao laughed bitterly and said, "Of course not. They aren't very useful for soul masters like us. Since that's the case, we don't have much research on them. Even in Shrek Academy, there are very few records on them. I vaguely recall that a million-year soul beast once appeared. It was called the Deep-Sea Devil Whale King. Our ancestor, Tang San, once obtained a soul ring from the sea." The Snow Empress said, "There are many aquatic soul beasts. In fact, there are more aquatic soul beasts than there are soul beasts on land. Furthermore, they are very strong. Their overall abilities are above that of land soul beasts. The only advantage that soul beasts on land possess is their outstanding fighting strength. I have to say that Di Qian is indeed very powerful. There was originally the Deep-Sea Devil Whale King among aquatic soul beasts who was very strong. However, even he wasn't Di Qian's match. According to what I know, in the aquatic regions close to the Dolor continent, there are a few such aquatic soul beasts. As for what types of soul beasts exist in further aquatic regions, I have no clue. However, I can still confirm that none of them would be Di Qian's match even if they exist. Di Qian is already the extreme. If not for the fact that he can't become a god, he would have tried for it. The Snow Empress and Dai Tian weren't friends. It was also precisely because of this that her appraisal of him was honest. Hui Yuhao's expression changed slightly. His future goal was to defeat Dai Tian. If he couldn't do so, he couldn't truly become a god and inherit the godly seat of the god of emotions. It was only by defeating Dai Tian that he could fulfill his goal. Right now, he didn't just learn how strong the beast god was from one aspect. Dai Tian was deservedly the strongest creature on the entire Delor continent. Tang Wutong asked, Snow Empress, is there an aquatic soul beast that's adept at spiritual power in this ice sea? If there is it possible for it to become Yuhao's spirit? The Snow Empress hesitated for a moment before replying, in the sea, there are many soul beasts that are adept at spiritual abilities. However, there's only one sufficiently strong species nearby. It's the mermaids. Mermaids? Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong were both curious. They had never heard of such a name before. The Snow Empress said, mermaids are also known as genies in the sea. They are the best in terms of spiritual abilities among all the aquatic soul beasts that I know. Their upper bodies are like humans, while their lower bodies resemble that of fish. Most of them are female, and the females rule their species. Whether it's a male or a female, the upper half of a mermaid is always very nice. The reason why they are called mermaids is because of their leader, who is known as the Princess of the Sea. The Princess of the Sea is the ruler of this aquatic region. Among the few aquatic soul beasts that can claim to have similar cultivation to mine, one of them is the Princess of the Sea. Her spiritual power is extremely strong. If she's fighting in the sea, even the Evil Eye Tyrant might not be able to beat her. However, the Evil Eye Tyrant is definitely stronger on land. Because of how strong they are and their spiritual abilities, many other species of aquatic soul beasts ally with them. Their overall abilities are rather strong. Tang Wutong asked, since aquatic soul beasts are so strong, why don't they venture onto land after their cultivation reaches a certain point? Wouldn't they benefit more? The Ice Empress smiled slightly and said, you can't use the mentality of land-bound soul beasts on aquatic soul beasts. To them, the sea is their habitat. It's where the living conditions fit them. Also, a big problem for them is that their abilities are greatly weakened when they leave the sea. The longer they are out of the sea, the more their lives will be in danger. Under such a condition, they are naturally not inclined to leave the sea. The Snow Empress said, if Yuhao wants to obtain a spirit from an aquatic soul beast, mermaids are definitely a good choice. There are 100,000-year mermaids. It's just that, as she spoke until here, she furrowed her brow before continuing, mermaids feel that they are above others. They don't really respect any other species of soul beasts. Furthermore, they are very strong. Trying to convince them won't be easy. After all, aquatic soul beasts don't regard humans as their natural enemies. Even that empire that specializes in making soul tools never threatens them. This video will end here.